What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Star Wars, The High Republic, Tales of Light and Life, The Queen's Bloom. Last time we made it through Chapter 2. Our buddy Axel Greylark and his friends arrived at the party for the Queen's Bloom Festival. In an attempt to escape, avoiding the view of Axel's mother and father, they stumbled into a kitchen where they witnessed some people being tied up and gagged and brought into the freezer. That's where our next chapter is going to be picking up. Be sure to like and subscribe for more Star Wars stories every single week. For the time being. Chapter 3. My sincere apologies, Axel said, putting all the bravado he did not feel into his voice. We wanted more fried caterpillars, but we can come back later. For a moment, Axel was certain they could turn back. Then the human woman smirked, and he knew he wasn't going anywhere. She was petite, with warm brown skin and soft black curls that framed her face. Axel had never seen anyone so beautiful, even if she was threatening to shoot him. Lock the door, the woman ordered, pointing with her blaster. Axel knew he shouldn't. He needed to try to get himself and his friends out of there. Parents were just on the other side of the door. Whatever was happening could be stopped. And yet her words were firm, calming. It was like listening to the pleasant chime of bells. He did as he was asked. Axel! Cosmo snarled, but kept his hands up. What do you want? What do you want? Those light lord asked the intruders. Credits? You got loads of them between us, whatever you want. The Twi'lek male bared sharp canines and what might have been a smile. Hear that, Alicia? Whatever we want. Axel could have punched Cosmo right then and there. Within reason, of course. My accounts are frozen at the moment, but I can get that fixed if you just let me. I hate these things, don't you? Alicia looked at her blaster and calmly holstered it. She chuckled as if they were all friends. Cosmo nodded eagerly while Axel and Laylee remained still. I have a better idea. You, with the stars. Come here. Axel's heart hammered in his eardrums. He wasn't thinking as much as reacting, putting his body between Laylee and the intruders. Look, Karen, how chivalrous, Alicia murmured, pleased. Under her probing gaze, Axel blushed. Lots of people... Oh, wait, I know you. Under her probing gaze, Axel blushed. Lots of people think they know me. I know you, she repeated it in that bell-chime vibrato. Well, now that we're such good friends, I tell you what. This is all a misunderstanding. We are merely here to liberate some excess that won't even be missed. No one has to get hurt. Leave your pretty friend here, and do me one tiny favor. Liberate some excess. There was a phrase for stealing he'd never heard before. Axel, when Laylee said his name, he registered her fear and regained his focus. Do as she says. Please. Axel shot Cosmo a meaningful look. He wasn't sure if it was the blasters aimed at their foreheads that bonded them through the trauma of it all, or if Cosmo truly cared for Laylee's safety. But the other boy nodded gravely, even if he practically hid behind Axel. What do you need us to do? Karen pointed carelessly with his blaster, and Axel stiffened. Put those on. In moments, Axel and Cosmo had stripped down and dressed up in the servers' crisp white uniforms. Cosmo mumbled the entire time. I knew hanging around you would bring me nothing but humiliation. Axel adjusted the metal visor over his eyes. The front of it pinched the bridge of his nose just enough to be uncomfortable, and everything within view took on a hazy gleam. Why in all the bleeding stars would someone make their staff wear something so ridiculous? It didn't matter. He made himself think of Laylee being put into binders and shoved into the refrigerator like the rest of the hostage kitchen staff. Yeah, well, no one asked you to hang around with me, Axel said, sounding perhaps more biting than he meant to. Cosmo scoffed, shoving his ridiculous medallion under his uniform before the thieves could do away with it, too. You're lucky to have a friend like me. Without me, you'd let Rayleigh run you off a cliff and think it was your idea all along. Axel laughed. What are you talking about? We're not friends. We're not. Cosmo was setting his visor into place, but Axel heard the hurt in the boy's question. Let's just get it over with. Axel turned over to his captors. He counted 10 in total, every one of them dressed in stolen uniforms. Karen remained behind, outfitted in the chef's long coat and funny little hat. Excuse me. Inside, he was vibrating with nerves, but if there was anything he'd learned from watching his parents face the piranha-infested waters of the Senate politics, it was to not let anyone see or fear. He spun on his heel and smirked. Do we pass your approval? Alicia chuckled. The others grimaced. She gathered her murder of thieves around, the music from the other room a distant echo. All right. Any moment now, the Queen's Bloom will begin. Guests will gather on the balcony. We'll have the run of the place. Jewels, timepieces, anything from the inventory list. I'll hit up the master bedroom. The rest of you leave no stone unturned. No pocket full of treasure. We get one sweep, so make it count. Questions? Yes, Axel said, holding his hand up like a very good student. What if there's something I fancy for myself? Then I'd ask myself if it's worth the life of your girlfriend. Alicia said it with a smile, but the threat rang in Axel's mind. Perhaps he needed to work on knowing when to be a glib. Shift change starts. She waited for the first round of awe filtering from the party. Now. Alicia unlocked the doors, and Axel and Cosmo followed the thieves as they picked up trays of food on the way out. Axel focused on keeping his palm steady, and not bumping into anyone because he couldn't see to save his life. Except, it wasn't his life that he was worried about. Laylee was in that freezer. Laylee was in trouble because he needed to sneak out. He should have let himself get caught by his parents. Mother wouldn't make a scene in public anyway. It was too late for that. Axel could almost admire the plan. Simple, seamless. They had a big enough distraction, wealthy gathering with precautions at the door to keep unwanted guests out. But no one protected the help, did they? He followed the others, letting claws, fingers, and a tentacle reach for the delicacies on his tray. No one gave him a second glance. He was nothing but a functional ornament. When his tray was clear, he picked up empty glasses and scanned the room for the perfect mark. A tipsy old man walking in circle in search of more drink. Axel noticed the man's timepiece and a heavy chain made of metal that looked liquid in its iridescence and expansive. Axel procured a flute of sour green drink and took it over to the cheery man. What is in this? It's remarkable. Remarkably terrible, but Axel said, Indeed. The man gasped and leaned into Axel's ear. I thought you were not supposed to talk. Panic flashed right through him, but clarity and opportunity quickly grounded him. He smiled back at the man. I couldn't help it, sir. How could someone not talk to you? Happy with the answer, the drunk man grinned and bopped along to the music, all the way back to the balcony. Axel shuffled away, using a cloth napkin to cover the trinkets he'd stolen. Heart racing, he'd moved on to his next target. With everyone out on the balcony, their attentions were focused on the sprawling view of the city and the islands beyond. Axel had witnessed the Queen's Bloom phenomenon his first year at university. Days after the rainy season, the air was thick with pollen and wet soil. Green shoots popped up everywhere, even in the cracks of paved streets and the marble grounds of the school. Everyone waited and waited, which was how festivities had developed. Why wait when one could make merry until the flowers opened. Axel hadn't been quite ready to admit how much he'd liked the phenomenon, how rare it was that something surprised him out of his boredom. He watched from the roof of his dormitory tower as the sun began to set and every bulb in sight opened. Petals spread apart as if they were exhaling into being, the fuzzy pollen shimmering with light. When a breeze blew, it carried the bioluminescent dust on the currents. It was like being surrounded by winking stars. When it got on the skin, as it inevitably did, it smeared phosphorescent. Everything, every single thing was blanketed with the queen's bloom. After a few hours, the light would fade, and only green pollen would be left behind. Was it beautiful because it was overwhelming, or was it beautiful because it was fleeting? Even now, tiny bits of it blew into the penthouse from the balcony, clung to every available surface. As startling as it was, he couldn't get swept up in all of it. He had to focus, to make his introduction into being a common thief worth it, because there was someone waiting for him to succeed. And Axel's tray felt too heavy. He turned a corner, back to the place where he'd hidden by the tall potted plants earlier. He had a few moments to return to the kitchen to do another run, but Cosmo found him. "You were frighteningly good at this," Cosmo said, a nervous laugh dotting his words. "I shouldn't be surprised." "Because I'm perfect at everything?" "Not everything, Greylock. I'm still ahead of you in school by 2 points. Cosmo smirked, and Axel realized what a nice smile his nemesis had. And then he remembered he had the hurt in his little boy. My goodness. Then he remembered the hurt in the little ward's voice when Axel had said they weren't friends. "Greylock, there you are!" The shot was not directed at Axel, but the man striding into the small alcove away from the gathering. Axel froze, Cosmo beside him, as Senator Lexier Greylock turned around and faced the happy drunk man Axel had stolen from. Axel was wearing a visor. He was unrecognizable, wasn't he? "Count Vennerson," his father said, dusting off the shimmering pollen that had gotten on his cape. "Good to see you. I thought we'd miss you today. Have you tried this delightfully sour concoction?" Actually, I just realized. "I thought we'd miss you today. Have you tried this delightfully sour concoction?" That's how I should say it. Axel didn't even allow himself to breathe deeply as his father looked right at him. The elder Greylock's large eyes narrowed. Did he know? Could he see? He handed Axel his empty glass and said thank you. Axel held it by the stem, but otherwise remained perfectly still. "Where is your charming wife?" Count Vennerson asked. "Kyung is viewing the phenomenon. It's her first. We wanted to surprise our son, but didn't want to disrupt his classes." "My daughter's in her first year," the little drunk man slurred. "We must introduce them. Bright futures ahead of them. Will you let me steal you away for a moment? I want to discuss the absolute nightmare of the hyperspace lanes in my sector." Axel knew he had to move. The other servers were gliding back to the kitchen, and if he wasn't among them with his loot, he was certain Alicia was a woman of her word. "Forgive me, Count Venison," Lexier Greylock said, distracted as he read a hollow that blinked from his comlink. "Steen Harkett. Is everything alright?" "My son has taken ill. I must get Senator Greylock and go see him at once." "We'll continue this conversation," the drunk count shouted, then resumed dancing and rejoined the party. As soon as the other men left, Cosmos tugged at his sleeve and said, "Axel." Axel had a tray full of stolen jewels, but he had one more item that needed liberating. He bumped into the drunk man. "Did you drop this?" Axel asked, offered the man his timepiece back. The man thanked him profusely, even as Axel slipped the man's blaster out of its holster. So relieved the man was to have something returned, he paid no heed to Axel's clubbed fingers. "What do you think you're doing?" Cosmo asked, alarmed. Axel blinked through the haze of Alicia's words. He knew better than to fall for promises from strangers. "Do you really think that they're going to let us walk away after we've seen their faces?" Cosmo was flustered and scared. Axel didn't need to see his eyes to notice it. The little lord's pinched lips, the tremble there. "Stay behind me," Axel said. "Follow my lead. We're getting out of here." "Somehow you are not reassuring at all." Still, they returned to the kitchen with their stolen goods, Cosmo at Axel's heels. They were the last ones back, every one of them tipping the contents of their deep trays into a Durasteel crate. It takes like tithes to a pretty god. Or a petty god, rather. "This should clear us with the huts," the Twi'lek said. Alicia watched the offerings as if she could count every credit with the ring of the King of Metal. Barely. It was Axel and Cosmo's turn. The little lord went first, adding his loot, hands shaking so he could throw the tray in too, and jumped back. "Not until I see Laylee." Axel kept his tray in hand. At the center, under the cloth, was the blaster. Alicia grinned again. "Of course. Get Laylee out of the freezer. We have to go." Karen returned with his girl. Axel was so relieved to see her he did not notice that she was no longer in restraints. But they walked side by side, so unlike a hostage and a captor. Axel grabbed his stolen pistol and stunned two of their crew. At his back, Cosmo shouted his name. Karen and the remaining crew raised their blasters, but Alicia raised a hand. The thieves beyond her silent command. Or obeyed her silent command. I don't know why I said beyond. "This wasn't part of our deal, Axel Greylock," Alicia said. There was something in her eyes that made him want to put his blaster down. The sensation was right there. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff. At her command, he'd want to take the leap. But no, why would he? He had someone else depending on him. "Let Laylee go," Axel demanded. "As you wish," Alicia said, and nodded not at Axel, but at her captive. "The rest of you, prepare for extraction." "Oh, darling," Laylee said, shaking her head. She looked from Cosmo to him, but he noticed then that her hands were free. She was dressed differently. No, not differently. She was wearing a holster that hadn't been there when they left school. "Oh, Axel, you really should have done as we asked." "We?" As in them and Laylee, not Axel and Laylee. Laylee, who had begged him to go out on that day, who had insisted they go to the tower, who had suggested their getaway route. "Laylee," he said. The Kiladwin girl, his girl, drew her blaster from her hip and shot. Red plasma flashed faster than Axel could blink and register that he hadn't been her target. Cosmo fell to the floor in a heap. "No!" The scream ripped from him as he turned and fired at the thieves. Blue light pulsed, and he cursed with every shot he missed. "Load it up, let's go," Karen shouted. They moved together, a seamless unit. Axel and Cosmo had only ever been part of a distraction. Meant to get left behind, caught and red-handed. They headed for the servants' exit corridor with their loot. "Do we have to hurt him?" the Kiladwin girl whispered. "Say your goodbyes, Laylee," Alicia said, that voice of hers almost hypnotic. Axel fell to his knees beside Cosmo. A black circle burned right at the center of his chest. He wasn't moving. He wasn't moving, and neither was Axel. Laylee crouched in front of him and tapped her nail on his chin. How many times had she done that before? She'd kissed him in the library, and they'd snuck out and spent lazy days on the beaches on the other side of the city. "You used me," was all that he could say. "Come on, darling," she said. "We had fun, didn't we?" I thought you wanted out of the family business, he said, his lip curling with anger and hurt. I do want out of the family business. I'm just not cut out for university. I'm still a Romero. You know what it's like, Axel. Deep inside, you do. We're the same. We're never going to please our families. We're never going to be what they want us to be. So we have to make our own way. And burn everything and everyone in the process. You'll learn, she said. Maybe next time you'll learn to never set your blaster to stun. Axel's hand shook so much he had to press the blaster flat against his chest to make it stop. They both knew he didn't have it in him to fire at her, to hurt her. The ship's leaving, Alicia said, eyes trained on Axel. I'll handle this. Laylee left, and she did not look back, but Alicia did. Her dark eyes brightened, a Tuca cat with many lives. What are you waiting for? Axel said with disgust, as if she was going to shoot him. She would do it. I'm admiring your bravery, she said, backing up, and your chaos. Axel met her stare. That spark built in the pit of his stomach. His heart raced the longer he stared, the longer he saw her knowing smile, the phosphorescent green streak down her cheek. Our paths will cross again, Axel Greylock. Of that I am certain. And then she was gone, vanishing behind the hissing lift door. Sorry. Axel let go of a pent-up cry. He shuddered as he pressed his palm over Cosmo's forehead. Somewhere in the kitchen, the hostages in the freezer banged against their enclosure. He wasn't sure how, but he had to get Cosmo's body back to the school. He had to. Get off of me, you reckless laser brain, Cosmo croaked. Axel blinked, unable to breathe as he watched his nemesis prop himself up on his elbows. Cosmo smiled. I must find a way to tell Father you should make a blaster-proof prototype. Right where the scorched fabric made a perfect circle, Cosmo brushed away a burn mark to reveal the medallion the little lord always wore. Hideous, Axel said, but functional. Now let's get the hell out of here. They opened the latch to the freezer, then made a break for it before confused staff could run out to get help. The two thieves Axel had stunned were slowly coming to, and would likely take the fall. There was no honor among thieves, it seemed. Because Cosmo was still woozy on his feet, Axel drove. They shared a tense silence, letting Laylee's unspoken betrayal settle between them. Axel had other things to worry about, but the day's celebration had the campus thrumming with so much cheer, they were able to slip unnoticed back to the East Tower. Thank you, Cosmo said, stalling at the door to his suite. For what? Axel frowned. For not leaving me behind. You could have saved yourself. You didn't have to stay for your nemesis. Don't make it weird. Axel keyed open his suite and hesitated. Save me a seat in class tomorrow. Cosmo grinned and finally said goodbye. When Axel entered his room, he wanted nothing more than to crash into bed, but he smelled like blaster fire and the horrible food from the party. He wanted to scrub off his memories from the day, even if it would take forever to forget the cold look in Laylee's eyes when she betrayed him. As he shrugged off the white jacket and kicked off his boots, he thought of the ringleader, Alicia. Her cryptic smile, her strange words. I'm admiring your bravery and your chaos. If he was lucky, he'd never see her again. It was a very big galaxy, at least. So distracted was he that Axel didn't notice the man sitting in his lounge until he spoke. I was wondering where you've been. Axel startled and almost choked on the word. Dad? And that is the end of Chapter 3. Next time it is going to be Chapter 4, the final chapter of The Queen's Bloom. So, thank you everybody for watching, and I'll catch you guys next week in the final chapter. Goodbye.